So welcome to those of you who are here very promptly. If you're watching this on replay, welcome to you too. You can see on screen with me, I'm joined by Diane Murphy, and she's here tonight to talk to us about advocating for nutrition for women with breast cancer. And she describes this as a journey with many layers. So she's going to take us on that journey with her tonight. It's an unfortunate reality that breast cancer is a diagnosis that's on the rise yet again. And so it's really important to have those resources to assist the people around us, whether that's our loved ones or our clients, if they happen to receive a diagnosis of breast cancer. So this webinar tonight is designed to take you on a typical journey between Diane and her clients who have breast cancer. So that's what we'll sort of be following along with you tonight on Diane. And for those of you who don't know her, Diane Murphy is a fellow Networking Nutritionist member. She works specifically with women who've been diagnosed with breast cancer and who are finding that they have to advocate for themselves throughout the treatment and the recovery process. And she helps her clients to build a team of supportive professionals outside of the conventional hospital setting and works closely with them to co-create a comprehensive plan that includes sustainable nutrition and lifestyle modifications. So thank you for coming here tonight, Diane. I know we've both been waiting for this for quite a while, so I'm excited for you to share all this information with everyone. So I'll really turn it over to you from here, however you want to get started. For everyone who is here live, please feel free to use the chat function as you normally do. We'll kind of keep our eyes there. But if there's any questions that you really want to make sure that we get to, pop those into the Q&A because that'll make sure that they don't get lost in the chat. But other than that, the evening is yours, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. And thanks so much for coming. Yes, I've been looking forward to this as well. So yes, thank you for that introduction. That's what I do. I've been a nutritionist. I am a holistic nutritionist and I specialize in working with women with breast cancer. But I haven't always done that. I graduated from IHN in Toronto 15 years ago and have done a bunch of things since, including having two kids who are now 13 and 10. But nutrition-wise, I've dabbled in pediatric and prenatal nutrition as well as working with women over 40 who needed help managing their weight and health conditions. And all this experience has helped prep me to some degree to where I am now. But I remember in my earlier years as a nutritionist, I didn't want to work with anyone who had cancer. And I don't know if any of you felt that way, but I felt very intimidated by it and ill-equipped to work with cancer clients. And this bothered me. I mean, I knew about some cancer-fighting foods, inflammation and fiber and that type thing, but I was really lacking a solid, comprehensive protocol. So I never felt like I was giving them what they really needed because I didn't really know what that was, or even who to refer them out to at the time. So I really tried to swerve the potential clients with cancer. Then a few years later, in my early 40s, friends my age were starting to get diagnosed with breast cancer. And then one of them passed away. And it made me think that if this were me, I just couldn't hand myself over to the conventional system thinking, giving them full control over my life. I mean, I don't even take Tylenol. So I got to work digging into the research and I was absolutely mesmerized. I couldn't believe how much was out there on cancer and nutrition. And I couldn't understand how come I hadn't heard about all this before. It was really mind blowing. And more importantly, it was really inspiring. Cancer was meant to be this death sentence and we had little control over it. But I was learning that this may not have to be the case. And one of the most informative and influential and inspirational people I listened to who really got me motivated to keep listening and learning was a man named Chris Swark from Chris Beat Cancer. He has amazing podcasts. He was a cancer survivor. He overcame stage 3 colon cancer using natural methods. Many years ago. And I started following him on his journey, and all of the experts and survivors who he has interviewed over the years are just so full of knowledge and wisdom. And along with him, I was researching the Gerson therapy, which did overlap a lot of what Chris was doing. I was getting acquainted with Dr. Zach Bush's work, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Ralph Moss, Jane McClellan, who I hope to be talking about later, even briefly with her How to Starve Cancer, and so many more. And I was discovering all these integrative cancer retreat centers around the world and seeing what they were doing. Not so much in Canada, but it was like there was a whole separate world out there focused on healing cancer using complementary alternative therapies. And the research and all the podcasts and all the docuseries that went along with it just became so addictive. I was getting hooked on that continuous flow of hope and inspiration that was hiding on the other side of mainstream medicine. And as I was learning, I gradually started taking on clients with cancer with more confidence. And one of my clients about 7 years ago had a naturopathic oncologist here in Toronto, which I had never heard of before. I knew that they had integrative doctors in the US, but the ND oncologist was new to me. So I got to see what kind of protocols he was giving her. And he was totally on board with everything I was doing, diet and lifestyle wise, with my client. And that was so reassuring. I think when we start a new niche or new in the business, or as a practitioner, I was working alone. So it was always nice when someone more experienced comes along and corroborates, what I was doing, because I was questioning myself all the time. And quite frankly, I still question myself all the time. But um, I don't think it was an accident that I had so much interest in nutrition and cancer, and that my career path was heading down this road. I kept saying over and over again, like to myself, that I really needed to put together a cancer fighting protocol that consolidated so much of what I was learning. And then eventually I did. It started in July 2020 when my sister was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, which was stage 4 because it had spread to her lymph nodes and into several places into her bones. But by this time, I felt very confident in what I could do to help her, help support her. So my sister had her conventional team at the hospital at Princess Margaret here in Toronto. And then she and I worked together to build her supportive team of professionals in the alternative world. And it was this time I had with my sister that really led me to formalizing my protocols, heading down the path of specializing into nutrition and breast cancer, and the real discovery that I was well and truly on my way to living my purpose. And the timing for me to make the switch couldn't have been better. No, I think things are changing in the demographic that's becoming more susceptible to breast cancer and cancer in general. I think it's changing in frequency, severity at the discovery stage, and the person's age. I think they're getting younger. And I hear this a lot. I see it in my own little world, and maybe you see it in yours too. Please feel free to comment if you are. But I think to some degree, everyone is seeing a lot more people being affected by cancer these days. Yes, yeah. So the women who are coming into my life with a breast cancer diagnosis over the last 12 to 18 months are mostly under 50. And some of them have literally woken up with a very aggressive 6 to 7 centimeter lump in their breast. And even my latest referral from just a few days ago are 2 sisters in their 30s. So it's horrifying. I think it's horrifying. And I really think that prevention is going to be more important than ever now. And I'll talk about that more toward the end too. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen now. So it's just a quick little itinerary about myself. I've already said that. Then I'm going to be talking a little bit about the women I work with, some obstacles with conventional treatment, 5 major drivers of cancer progression, and the ones that I teach my client about, and then my approach with my clients. And I'll be going into a little bit about what I include in my own protocol. Okay. So, yeah, so after getting, a front seat view of the conventional system with my sister, I couldn't ignore the massive gap between the conventional and alternative treatment worlds, especially when it came to diet. And I felt very determined to help to close that gap in whatever small way that I could. But after doing so much research on nutrition and lifestyle and cancer, which never, ever ends, the more I learn, I feel like the less that I know, I'm sure. So it was really time for me to switch gears, though. I wanted to start learning more about the women who I was going to be working with a lot more now, and what they were going through or have gone through. What were some of the major obstacles for the women with breast cancer? So I ended up doing what turned out to be one of the best things that I could have done for my business, and my own personal growth as a nutritionist, and did my own market research. I interviewed dozens of women who have had a breast cancer diagnosis, because I wanted to know how they felt after they got it. What happened in their lives? How did it change their lives? What were they offered in the world of nutrition and lifestyle? What did they think was missing in their process? I wanted to know what she went through so I could decide how best to work with her. And it also helped me with writing my content because I could use her words when and make my content more relatable and genuine now that I knew so much about many of their backstories. And I learned so much from these women and my current clients as well in regards to what they had to go through in the conventional system, and also how their diagnosis made them feel emotionally and mentally. And there were four major themes or obstacles that were consistent with every woman I interviewed. So I'll just paint a little picture for you of what she's typically going through. And of course, this may resonate with some of you already. So the first major theme was fear and uncertainty, which is no surprise, right? She is scared to death and she lacks hope because she doesn't know if she'll live to watch her kids grow up, retire or vacation, or be able to do all the things that she wanted to do. There's so much uncertainty about what this diagnosis means for her family and her future and their future. Am I going to make it a year from now, 3 to 5 years from now? Uncertainty of that 5-year survival mark that is, often spoken about. And the next one was a lack of information. So she has a series of appointments, blood work, biopsies, scans, and treatments on top of her already busy life, which often has to get put on hold. And she doesn't really know what's going on because there's so little information from her doctors. There's no clear diagnosis. It seems like maybe the conventional system is sort of putting less emphasis on staging her cancers, staging cancers. So she ends up Googling and discovers, terrifying information about her condition. And then on top of this, she goes through, a year or two of treatment and, hospital visits. And once she's done everything that she can do at that point, there's no clear action plan once she leaves the hospital post-treatment. So what can she do to reduce the risk of recurrence, and really start to heal her body from everything that's just been done to it? As you may be aware, cancer treatment is carcinogenic in itself. And while it can solve one problem, it creates so many others. And eventually she learns this and she wants to find out what she needs to do and what she can do at home to help prevent her from going through this again. Another really big one, which isn't a surprise given her age now, is a lack of control. She feels helpless. She feels like she's lost control over her body, her life, her emotions. So many critical decisions over her body are being made for her. And some of the women I interviewed, and most of my clients, are in their 40s and 50s. They've got kids, careers, households to run, finances to manage, and maybe elderly parents to care for. She's used to being a big decision maker and being in control. And then now she's dealing with something that she's told is growing out of control. And I've often heard cancer patients say that once they're in the conventional system, it's really hard to get out. The doctors can be very confident in what they're doing, which can feel very reassuring, but also intimidating. So if they have questions about, trying something else more natural, they were often afraid to ask or didn't push back when they were told that, this was the only way to treat cancer. They just went through this automated system that involved a series of blood work, chemo, surgery, and radiation. Basically any real discussion outside the standard of care wasn't going to be addressed. And then finally, there was a lack of support. So from someone who really gets it, and interesting enough, at the time of my initial interviews about a year and a half ago, this was the case for the women I spoke to. Even though she had, a lot of support from friends and family, she felt isolated because she didn't know another woman who had gone through breast cancer as well. And she just wanted someone to talk to. She wanted to feel inspired by other women who had survived breast cancer. But with my more recent clients in the last 6 months or so, this seems to be changing. Now the younger woman coming to see me likely has a friend or a sister or a relative who's actually going through the same thing at roughly the same time. So rather than looking for support from someone who has long survived breast cancer, they're going through it with someone, and seeking support from them, which can have its pros and cons too, right? So those are the four major obstacles in her recovery, and they're all hitting her at the same time. So on top of the fear and uncertainty, lack of information, control and support, there's the physical aspect too. So when I speak with some of the moms in my kids' schoolyard, sadly, this is where I'm getting some of my clientele these days. They tell me about the physical toll. And I mean, I can see it too to some degree, but they feel like pincushions as they're constantly getting poked and prodded and biopsied, getting PICC lines or ports put into them for chemo. One woman developed a blood clot from the process. They're getting healthy, non-cancerous lymph nodes removed to be tested. Some have 3 removed, some have 12. And what does this do to their immune system? That massive factor in their survival, right? So these young, beautiful women are losing their hair, their eyelashes, their eyebrows. They're having their breasts amputated. And some women say they've been called sir, and it feels like such an attack on their femininity, but still there they are most days in the schoolyard, showing up with their kids on time, homework done, and lunch is made, right? So this is the woman who I've decided to build my program around, the woman who is advocating for herself and excuse me, and the woman who has such a strong will to live and to live better. So I want to help soften the blow of these emotionally draining obstacles and provide her some support, give her substantial information so she can empower herself to take back some of that control that she feels like she's missing, and teach her so she can make informed decisions as we put together her recovery plan. And this in turn inspires hope, and allows her to focus on something that's, not just really good for her, but can help to alleviate some of that overpowering fear, uncertainty, and overwhelm. I mean, we know as nutritionists that we have more control over our health than we may think. But many of these women don't know this. And granted, I think cancer is a whole different beast and it can change for better or for worse quickly. But there are countless survivors out there who have come out the other side of cancer, even against all odds. I have 2 in my own family and know a few more who have done it. And sometimes they bounce back stronger than ever. So, why not her, right? But when she puts herself back in the driver's seat and when she starts to take that control that is within her grasp, she can significantly change her quality of life and possibly the course of her diagnosis. Okay, so I see I have a comment here. Okay, sorry. All right. So yes, differences in boundaries. So just before I move on to obstacles with the conventional system, I just want to speak briefly about how my clients with breast cancer differ somewhat than my previous clients who I was seeing for weight loss or other less severe health conditions, and also talk a little bit about boundaries, as someone had been asking me about this recently. One thing I really love and admire about my clients now is their strong will to survive and their determination to get started on something that makes sense to them. I've always loved my clientele as a nutritionist, but there's something special about her. There's something different to some degree with her as opposed to the women I was working with who were over 40 who wanted to lose weight and slow down the aging process a little bit, right? So the urgency, of course, to make changes and often radical changes is much more real for my clients with cancer. And they're typically willing to do a lot more in a shorter period of time. Their determination and thirst for knowledge is pretty fierce, and they're more committed to making the changes. They just need the guidance, right? They don't throw up the obstacles that I would often hear before, like, I don't have the time or the money, or my husband won't let me. Cancer has thrown them into a selfish position, and they're much more likely to make their health a priority now, now that they're fighting to get it back. So, and as we work closely together, weekly one-to-ones for up to 3 months, so we establish a real connection and I care about them, but with this kind of bond comes some necessary boundaries. And the boundary in particular I'm referring to is more emotional and something I need to control as opposed to something that's really business related. It's important for me to detach myself from their outcome because anything can change at any time with a cancer diagnosis. It is very humbling. And especially when it comes to a close friend or family member, my innate desire to want to save them and to see them get better is so intense that I had to make the conscious effort to separate myself from that. I had a very active role in my sister's life while she had cancer. And there was a solid year when she was doing exceptionally well and she was blowing the doctors away. She was doing better than they had imagined. And my sister and other family members were saying things like, oh my God, you're going to save her life. And I just couldn't take that responsibility on as desperately as I wanted that. I had to make peace with my limitations and that I was doing the best that I could in supporting her, but it wasn't in my hands. And this was a pivotal realization for me as I was moving toward specializing in breast cancer, like releasing myself of the expectations of others, whether they were, the person with cancer or a family member or whoever, and especially in a stage 4 situation, there's such desperation to find someone to save them. But I think as nutritionists and healers, this is something that we all eventually have to come to terms with. We aren't responsible for someone else's outcome. We can only offer them our love, our support, our knowledge, our guidance along the way, because at the end of the day, this is really their journey. Okay, now the fun part, obstacles with the conventional treatment. Just going to move on to some of these that I come across working with women who are also receiving conventional treatment and or taking, other meds. There's a lot, but I won't get into all of them. So depending on how advanced or aggressive their cancer is, my clients are typically undergoing what is called the big 3. So that means surgery, chemo, and radiation in whatever order. I mean, this is pretty much the standard of care in the conventional medicine. And the timing of things is important. So especially for the changes I'm asking them to make. So they may come to me eager to get started, but then they have to start chemo and it's a whole new situation, understandably. So something I have really come to see over and over again is that these women are really in survival mode and they come in with incredible strength and determination, and these treatments put them through hell several times over and suck the life out of them. So sometimes we have to move more slowly. We have to pivot a lot. Maybe we look at the blood work to see if there's pressing priority, or even take a break for a while as she just tries to get through the next treatment. And chemo can last for months. And this is typically after that's done, or when they're in chemo, they usually lose interest in diet here. So it could be a couple of months before they actually are ready for me. And then by that time, when they're finished, they might be so tired that the momentum is worn off a bit. So I need to reach out and re-inspire her again, hopefully, and remind her that, now more than ever is the time to really rebuild and nourish her body. Personally, I would say my biggest obstacle, though, has to do with supplementation, because sometimes it's not even possible. So while it's normal for them to be told to go off all supplements for 2 weeks pre and post radiation, chemo, and surgery, outside of that, oncologists have this automated no when it comes to discussing supplements. And when their patients want to know why, it's still just no. They don't want to take any chances. New medications are coming out, every day, and they may not know which supplements might be contraindicated. And human trials, are very limited usually to show otherwise. So many are forced to go off of supplements, especially if they're in a clinical trial for a medication. And this is really tough on the client, especially when they get really gung-ho about implementing natural therapies into their recovery plan, and then their oncologist just dismisses it or tell them it won't help. But I mean, having said that, there are definitely some foods and supplements worth noting that have been shown to interfere with meds, and it's usually herbs. There are multiple active constituents in herbs, as we know, that give them their medicinal qualities. So it does stand to reason that some of them just might interact. For example, several herbs are processed through the liver, and they can interfere with cytochrome P450 enzymes, which are involved in drug detoxification, and they can decrease or increase the potency of the drug. So these ones in particular, I'll show you what they are, in particular can interact with chemo meds or other immunosuppressive meds for breast cancer. So we have curcumin, EGCG, which is the active compound in green tea. Turkey tail is a type of mushroom. So usually they won't really let them go on mushrooms anyway, but turkey tail in particular interferes with chemo meds. Grapefruit and pomegranate inhibit the enzymes in the liver responsible for metabolizing certain meds like statins, as you might be familiar, but also some cancer meds. Kava kava, St. John's wort is a big one, echinacea, garlic as a supplement, flax seeds and psyllium. They can still have flax seeds and psyllium, but they need to take them an hour before or after medications because they can delay or reduce the drug absorption, apparently. So valerian, milk thistle, which is such a shame because their livers are really taking such a beating. Quercetin, resveratrol, which is an immune modulator that boosts the immune system in low doses, but can actually suppress it in high doses. And it can also act as a chemoprotectant, which means in some circumstances, it can actually support the cancer cells. And then we've got sulforaphane, IC3, and DIM. DIM is, even though very beneficial for metabolizing estrogen, this is a big no-no for women with breast cancer and conventional oncology, especially, with so many taking hormone therapy. However, I do see it being recommended by integrative doctors in the US under the same conditions, which is very confusing to the patient if they've gone for a second opinion with an integrative oncologist and they're getting this conflicting information. And getting a second opinion from a doctor in the alternative world who suggests a completely different treatment plan or says they can supplement with things our oncologist says no to, is another huge obstacle. But supplementation is really tricky, when she's undergoing conventional treatment, because some of these can interfere or improve the body's response to chemo and help to lessen side effects. It's different for different cancers. For example, curcumin interferes with cyclophosphamide, and doxorubicin, which is known as red devil, commonly given to women with breast cancer in the early stages of chemo. But it's seen safe for people with metastatic colon cancer as an adjunct or a support to FOLFOX chemotherapy. So sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. There is still so much research that has to be done. So I always suggest to my client that she has a naturopath who specializes in oncology to help with supplementation. And I have to keep in mind too that not only are they getting radiation or taking higher low dose chemo meds, they're often taking a mixed bag of other drugs like immunotherapy meds, aromatase inhibitors, bone support meds, with the sudden loss of estrogen, blood thinners sometimes, anti-nauseants, stool softeners, and maybe other heart meds like blood pressure meds, all these extra things they could be taking that are treating the side effects of treatment. So pummeling them with supplements is not something that I make priority, especially if they're already coming in overwhelmed as it is. And once they're done treatment and given the meds that they're going to take for the next 5 years or whatever, then we'll have a bit more wiggle room for supplements. Okay, so maximizing diet and lifestyle is my main focus with them. And I'll show you some of what that looks like. But first, I'm going to get into 5 major drivers of cancer that I speak to her about, because educating her so she can feel more empowered and involved in her recovery process really benefits her. It's a big part of addressing that lack of information and lack of control aspect, and it helps her to see the valuable connection between what she's eating and how she's living is directly impacting her health. And this will motivate her to make the necessary changes. So we can't always know how she got cancer, but we can definitely identify problem areas in the past and make some changes so she's not living that life that potentially gave her cancer to begin with. I teach her about 5 major drivers of cancer and cancer progression and let her know that this is what we're going to be addressing in her recovery plan. So the first one is nutritional deficiencies, not a big surprise. Time and time again, I hear that 95% of the causes of cancer are rooted in our lifestyle, our habits and our rituals, and one being what we eat and what we don't eat. Deficiencies of folate, vitamin B6, B12, niacin, vitamin C and D and E, iron and zinc, they cause DNA damage that will contribute to the formation of cancer. So basically, like radiation, nutrient deficiencies can cause breaks in the genetic hardware of the cell. So if the cell doesn't repair itself, it can cause abnormal growth and eventually become a malignant cancer. And the oxidative stress, of course, free radical damage is a major reason for the development of cancer. So a high antioxidant diet is key for prevention, like vitamin C, et cetera. And zinc is really crucial to the stability of DNA, and a deficiency can disrupt the repair of damaged DNA as well as the enzymes that are responsible for that DNA repair. The next one is inflammation. So I think a lot of us know this already as, one of the cornerstones to most chronic disease, if not all of it. It's often at the root. I teach my clients that much of the inflammation in the body is triggered by what's on the end of our forks. And so teaching her about inflammatory and anti-inflammatory foods is an important part when we go to build their recovery plan. We have a discussion about the microbiome. We all know the importance here of gut health and being able to absorb all those valuable nutrients as opposed to having them leak outside the body. But rebuilding the gut, is essential, but healthy bacteria live outside the gut too. And the breast has a microbiome that needs to be kept healthy as well. And this is something I'm looking more into as I go along. There's not a ton of information out there, but I'll follow it up. But treatment certainly takes a toll on the whole body. The doxorubicin is a common chemo drug. It's also an anti-cancer, but also an antibiotic. So we focus on rebuilding a healthy biome to help protect all the cells in her body. And we talk about supporting it through diet and in nature. Okay, and then the fourth, another major cause of cancer or cancer progression is called angiogenesis. So this is when the tumor starts to create a new blood vessels from an existing one to redirect the nutrients coming in to feed itself, thereby weakening the healthy cells around it. So now this is a normal healthy process for healthy cells as well, but when the tumor does it, obviously it's a lot worse. And there are foods that have anti-angiogenic properties. And here's a list of these ones. Green tea, which even if she can't supplement with it, often it's okay if they have a cup. If they can't supplement with it, there are things they can supplement with rather, but it's okay that they eat. Doctors seem to have much less problem with some teas if they're not overdoing it, and food. So green tea, strawberries, blackberries, all these berries, oranges, grapefruit, if it's not going to interfere with her meds, lemons, apples, pineapple, cherries, red grapes, red wine, which I don't really recommend during, while active cancer because it's so toxic to the liver. But bok choy, kale, soybeans, ginseng, maitake mushroom. Now I have licorice here because this one is for all cancers, but for licorice is usually avoided for women with breast cancer because it can activate estrogen receptors in the body. And then we've got turmeric, which is, I spelled wrong, nutmeg, artichokes, lavender, pumpkin, sea cucumber, tuna, parsley, garlic, tomato, olive oil. If I have time later, I want to talk to you about my olive oil and oleocanthal, grapeseed oil, dark chocolate, and then there's a whole bunch of others. But, she feels really empowered when she can see a list of normal foods that can actually have a lot of these healing properties. But, and the good thing is it doesn't stop angiogenesis for the healthy cells, just for the cancer cells. Okay, and then we talk about abnormal stem cells. So the thing about cancer is that it overcomes the surveillance system of the immune system and then divides so rapidly. And the modern day cancer treatments can go after those fast dividing cancer cells, but they typically don't go after the smaller, quieter abnormal stem cells that can pop up. But we have over 20 trillion natural killer cells in our body that are designed to do just that. So I teach my clients how to leverage these cancer fighting cells as best they can. So some of this is through immune boosting foods like mushrooms, for example. So again, she can't supplement with it, but she's usually allowed to eat them. And plenty of evidence does exist that commonly consumed foods that include vitamin A and E and all the anti-cancer polyphenols in fruits, vegetables, cocoa, olive oil, and, of course, omega-3 fatty acids in fish oil, along with vitamin D, can modulate natural killer cell activities. Black cumin seed oil is said to increase natural killer activity by 30% in 4 weeks. And then, of course, things like meditation and deep breathing, anything that can help relieve stress is going to help to support the natural killer cells. And many researchers believe that we can teach abnormal stem cells how to grow up and become healthy adult cells through lifestyle and dietary modifications. So that's what we aspire to when we are putting together her recovery plan. And speaking of stem cells, research shows that IV vitamin C therapy alone is 10 times more potent than chemotherapy on the cancerous stem cell. So here's just an interesting piece of information because vitamin C, there's really two phases of vitamin C. It's an antioxidant and a pro-oxidant. So at low doses, vitamin C is an antioxidant. But the idea behind the IV vitamin C therapy is to get the dose high enough, from 25 grams to 75 grams, to increase plasma levels until it changes from an antioxidant to a pro-oxidant, where it can then produce hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2, in the connective tissue around the tumor. So the H2O2 releases one of its own oxygen molecules into the cancer environment and kills the cancer. And then the H2O2, because it's dropped an oxygen molecule, really just turns into plain H2O, which is water, and is safely excreted by the kidneys. It's just a beautiful thing. And from what I understand, the higher the IV vitamin C dose, the more H2O2 is produced. And this doesn't hurt the healthy cells. Back in the early 90s, my aunt in her 70s had leukemia, and they had done chemotherapy and all the stuff they had to do. And then there was nothing they could do for her anymore. And they sent her home to die. And this radical doctor just said, you know what, let's try this IV vitamin C therapy thing. And she ended up going into remission for 5 years. So why it isn't used more in the standard of care now, I don't know. But I do know naturopathics and naturopathic oncologists typically use it now too, which is good. All right, so just moving right along here. So my approach with my clients. So after years of researching and interviewing women who have had a breast cancer diagnosis, moving to specializing in breast cancer and seeing clients and gaining experience, I was finally able to put a protocol together for breast cancer that I'm happy with, at least for now, and is giving my clients positive results in some shape or form. Ultimately, my focus is helping to leverage her healthy cells. So even though she has cancer, she still has trillions of healthy cells, and we need to try and protect and stabilize the DNA of those cells by leveraging nutrition and lifestyle. And her quality of life is incredibly important, increasing her energy, helping her to sleep so she can heal, decreasing inflammation and improving digestive health, all the things that we would normally do with our clients anyway. So all of these things are included in my protocol, which I now call my BCCAR program, my breast cancer care and recovery. I believe that every woman, no matter what stage her cancer is at, should be given a recovery plan that focuses on nutrition and lifestyle to complement her treatment plan if she is on one. So I won't pull up my whole program, but I'll give you my top 10 recommendations that I give to my breast cancer clients, and anyone really who's trying to prevent breast cancer or any cancer in the first place. And these help to create healthy habits that she can do on a regular basis. And I think they're pretty sustainable. And for the most part, I do them myself as well. And these recommendations also include the 2 healthy habits that consistently make the most significant impact on their blood work as I've seen it. And they're the ones that I start them off with. And those are juicing fresh vegetables and drinking wheatgrass. So I'm going to get to the wheatgrass part a little later. But because my clients are typically coming in overwhelmed, I don't like to take a whole ton of stuff out of their diet right from the beginning. So I start with these heavy hitters. I constantly see amazing results here. And for my clients who are recommending this to others with cancer, they're seeing the same thing. I've seen white blood cells go right back up in less than a week. And because most of my clients are at the hospital either weekly, biweekly, or monthly, I get the benefits of seeing their blood work. So I recommend that my clients get involved in monitoring it. And so we track it on a spreadsheet so we can look for any trends. And during active treatment, their white blood cells take a big hit, and they need to be at certain levels to continue treatment. So I've seen hemoglobin and white blood cells that were declining week after week. Then they came to work with me, and in just under a week, we've been able to bring them back to levels that were better than they had been since the beginning of their treatment, which puts them in a much better and safer place to receive treatment. And this is because of the juice. So I see I have something in the chat. I said wheatgrass. Yeah. So I'm going to get back to that in a few minutes. So right now I'm just going to talk about the juicing, and you can juice wheatgrass, but I have another option too. Okay. But, especially post-treatment, the wheatgrass gives them the fresh juice or the wheatgrass just gives them such a beautiful glow. It can take years off of their face. It can strengthen their nails, which take a big hit during chemo. Their hair grows in and it looks soft and healthy as it grows back. Some are not getting the amount of gray that they had before they even lost their hair. Their energy levels are up, and their quality of life is so much better when they're saturating their cells with fresh cold pressed juice or wheatgrass. So I do ask all of my clients to plan on getting a good juicer and I help them with this, and be prepared to use it on a regular basis, because this is one of the best, if not the best, things that she can do for herself. And it's important to saturate her cells with these nutrients quickly. So they asked me if they can just throw everything in the blender instead, because that's what they have at home, which she can totally do at any time during the day. But I still want her to do that on top of the juicing, because the fiber in the blending will just slow down the absorption, and they'll get fuller faster, and we won't be able to saturate those cells as quickly with all those nutrients that we want to. So, I mean, this is labor intensive and it's expensive because the veggies need to be organic, but it is well worth it. And when they see the amazing things that happen to their blood work in a very short period of time, along with how much better they feel, they stay motivated to do it. And if they can't juice for whatever reason, they won't feel like it during chemo most of the time. Then they can either actually order from a company that can deliver it to them if they can stomach it, or they can just do the wheatgrass, which has, and I'll show you that, which has the same amazing results. And it's so much easier. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But as far as the juicing, what does she juice? So general rule of thumb is juice the veggies and eat the fruit. And she can juice whatever veggies she wants to. Ones that I typically recommend are definitely carrots. They're high in beta carotene. It has, can reduce the risk of breast cancer recurrence. It has anti-tumor properties as well against breast cancer. Celery, which contains something called apigenin, which can inhibit NCAPA B, a key driver in bone metastasis. And apigenin has even by 2015 or 16 had over 600 studies done on it. So I can only imagine how many more they've done now. Cabbage, of course, cruciferous vegetable, contains sulforaphane and indole 3-carbinol, which have shown to have anti-tumoral activity against breast cancer, as well as inducing apoptosis, which is the death of the cancer cell. So she can't obviously supplement with the sulforaphane or the indole 3-carbinol. If she can do a little bit of, if she's doing treatment, I'd still encourage her to ask her doctor if it's okay if she can juice the cabbage. Can be a little bit gassy. So if not, it's fine. We can leave that one out and she can just eat it with a salad later on in the day. And then apples, of course, amazing source of quercetin. And we go for the Granny Smith ones because they're lower glycemic. They have inhibitory effects on cancer progression through several mechanisms here, which is apoptosis, again, the death of the cancer cell, cycle cell arrest, and metastasis inhibition, so controlling the spread. Turmeric root, again, we'd like to try to put a little bit. If she's going through chemo or radiation, she can ask her doctor if it's okay if she still uses it in her juice. But if not, then she can go ahead and just use it as a powder in her cooking. It contains, actually, turmeric or curcumin is actually the most widely anti-cancer spice that's been studied. Really super powerful, contains active ingredient, of course, curcumin, which inhibits the cancer stem cells, another thing we want to go for. Can also decrease the side effects of conventional treatment. Okay, and then we've got ginger root, our lovely anti-inflammatory, known for its anti-metastatic and anti-invasive properties. Research specifically shows that it can inhibit breast cancer cell invasion. So another one that we like to add to the juice too. If she wants to add cucumbers and beetroot or broccoli, whatever else, she can certainly do that, and she can do a little bit or she can do a lot while she's going through treatment. After she's gone through treatment, she can have as much as she wants to. So when she has active cancer, if she's done sort of the big three, then I usually try to work her up to about 1,400 mils a day as we go through. So some Gerson therapy does 2 or 3 times that, I think, and then some others go a lot less, but that one, 1400 is kind of the one we've just settled on. And it seems to be working really well. Okay, and if that's just too tough, then we'll do wheatgrass. Let me just look at my comment here first. Oh, it's okay. The sugary. So is there a concern about the sugary vegetables? No, we're okay with that. I mean, if she's diabetic, but no, we haven't had any issues with blood sugar control with that. If she was diabetic, then we would have her have it with a meal, but so far so good. And in any of the, people I follow or any studies that I've read, I haven't seen anything that says that that's going to be an issue. All right. Okay, so here's the wheatgrass too. If the juicing just gets too much, or she doesn't enjoy it, or she can do this at the same time. Personally, if this were me, I would do both at the same time. They both have a world of things to offer. What got me on the wheatgrass was at one point when my sister's hemoglobin, I would always track her blood work. She was getting blood work every month, so we would track it together. And we started to notice her hemoglobin going down. So, and her red blood cells. So, the more I thought about it, I thought, and she had been starting the juicing already, but I had thought about, hemoglobin and chlorophyll, hemoglobin being, a big factor in helping oxygen to transport around the body. So, and chlorophyll being almost identically similar as a molecule. So I had been looking at wheatgrass for many years, trying to find something really fresh because I didn't want to juice. I didn't like juicing it. It was expensive and you only got such a small amount. But every time I had looked it up over the years, I really just found powdered stuff. Nothing ever really came to me. So I kind of gave up on it. So, but when this happened with my sister, I Googled it again, and this was the very first site that popped up for me. So, everything happens for a reason, I think. And this was a farm that is Stouffville, Ontario, small, 40 minutes away from where I live. And the story behind this briefly is the farmer, Tom, they opened this in 1972, and it's run by a farmer, Tom, and his wife, Janice, which is spelled like Janice, but pronounced Janice. And she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer that had gone to her lymph nodes. And he was just thinking, well, cows don't get cancer and horses don't get cancer. What do they eat? They eat grass. So he, went out there and started planting wheatgrass, and he even puts kelp in his soil if he made the connection of, the iodine for breast tissue. And so that's what he's done. And he's been doing that for 50 years. And she didn't have any conventional treatment, no surgery, no chemo, no radiation. And 50 years later, she's still cancer-free. So many people from all around North America with cancer come to this place or order from this place. And and people from Princess Margaret, some of our bigger hospitals, to go there. So he recommends for people with active cancer to have a full sheet a day. So if we don't have any issues with that, that's what we do. And I've seen so many amazing results in the blood work when it doesn't always have to be a full sheet. I've seen great results in, even just 6 a day. But I know with my sister battling stage 4 cancer, this was like such a gem for her. And it brought her hemoglobin right up, within just a few weeks. And it could have been sooner. It's just, that's how often she was getting her blood work. So why wouldn't you recommend powdered wheatgrass? You know what? I think fresh is just best. So fresh is just best because here they don't even let it hit oxygen. Like as soon as they juice it, it gets frozen right away. So you still have those live enzymes in there. So, and you've got proteolytic enzymes, which like to chew off the membrane, the outer membrane of the cancer cells. So I would say fresh. If for some reason you couldn't get fresh, I would just say stick to your juicing. And if you wanted to do the powdered, you can get the powdered, but by all means, get the fresh. And what do I mean by a whole sheet? So what we see here is the whole sheet is 10 ounces. Each little cube, if you can tell on the screen there, has half an ounce in there. And all the edges are perforated, so you can just pull them off and then use them like ice cubes. So for me, I would use 4 as a maintenance dose. But for someone with cancer, it just depends. I mean, I've had somebody who was going through chemo, and week after week, her blood work, her white blood cells were going down to 1.8, and she had to be at a 2 to start a certain chemo med. But everything was going down, her hemoglobin, her platelets, her white blood cells. And all she did was 2 ounces. So she just did 4 cubes, because again, each is half an ounce. And then they did her blood work the next week, and she went from 1.8 to 2, and to 1.8 to 2.9. And this was the only thing that she had done differently after weeks of, and her hemoglobin had gone up, and her platelets too. I'm just gonna lost my cursor here. Okay. Are there any other foods with similar qualities to wheatgrass for individuals who may have a wheat allergies? So with wheatgrass, they can typically, it's meant to be gluten-free. So is that what you mean? Like, because are you worried about the gluten, or, oh, sorry, not gluten allergy, because I do understand it's gluten-free. So they have a wheat allergy. So I would say just to stick to the juicing then. So yeah. So I haven't come across anybody who's had issues with the wheatgrass, but if they did, then that's what I would say, to stick to the juicing. Okay. All right. So I'll just move along here. Okay, so for every client who comes in, or anybody I speak to, really, this is the book that one of the books that I definitely recommend that they read. It's called Radical Remission: Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. I've pretty much rewritten it all on Post-it notes again. It's definitely a well-used book. I asked them to you can get it from the library, or $21 off Amazon. And the interesting thing about it, Kelly Turner was a psychotherapist. I'm just going to give you a little tidbit of information here. And so she was, she was wondering what oncologists did after their patients had made spontaneous remissions. She was curious about how people who had, cancer, terminal cancers were beating it against all odds. So she would find, and what she found out was that these spontaneous remissions were basically just being filed, right? And that's it. So she wanted to know, what were these people doing? Like, how come they made these, went into these remissions? So she interviewed over, I think, 1,000 people at least by the time she was writing this book. And she came across about 75 of, common things that they were doing. And then she broke it down to the main 9 that she was doing. And the main 9 that were key factors for all of them. So I have that on the next slide. So if you don't want the spoiler alert, you might just want to walk away for a minute or two. Okay, so these are the 9 that she came up with. And these are in no particular order, but these are the ones that they're all doing. So radically changing your diet, taking control of your health, following your intuition, using herbs and supplements, releasing suppressed emotions, increasing positive emotions, enhancing social support, deepening your spiritual connection, and having strong reasons for living. So, you can see diet and supplements and herbs are just a small part of it. A lot of it is like deep within, and the book is beautiful. It is so inspiring. It's an easy read. And she goes through, each one of these 9 things and uses her case studies to give it lots of examples. So it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend that one. Okay, and the next is, I know where we are at time, so, and I know you're probably all nutritionists here, so I won't get too much into these things that you already know, but we definitely target inflammation, and of course the juicing and the wheatgrass are a huge part of that, but regularly removing gluten, dairy, sugar, and alcohol from the diet. If she has active cancer, then we try to keep these out as much as possible for as long as possible. And if she's, in a stage, if she has advanced cancer and she's just managing it at that point, then, we definitely don't want to take all of her joys of life away from her. So they eat and drink a big variety of anti-inflammatory foods every day. Bone broth, I'm a huge fan of bone broth. I've seen, I've helped some of my clients gain weight and be in a better position for treatment with bone broth. Onions, garlic, ginger, turmeric, lemons, fresh herbs, of course, basil, cilantro, oregano, rosemary, we can go on. So an anti-inflammatory diet is important. high fiber foods, of course, to avoid the auto intoxication that she can get from constipation. So often they have to be put on stool samples. The medication they're taking can really cause constipation. But we want her eliminating all that excess estrogen too, right? And also maintaining a healthy weight. If she needs to lose weight, because as your fat cell grows, you get more estrogen receptors on that fat cell. So we want to make sure she's got a healthy weight. And then eating a superfood daily. This is one thing I really, when she's got active cancer and we're doing her protocol, as much as she can to include a big superfood salad. So the base of that would be, kale with, any of the superfoods you see on here, but, some broccoli in there, some cabbage, some hemp hearts, some olive oil with oleocanthal, and then apple cider vinegar if it doesn't interfere with her aromatase inhibitor. If so, then just some lemons, and just sprinkling on all those nice dried herbs or fresh herbs. And that, of course, is great for her fiber too. Probiotic foods, sometimes this is questionable giving fermented foods to people who are immunocompromised. But any of the ones, like when I go to the Block Center or any of those integrative centers and I look at their protocols, when my clients get second opinions from those places, all of them have these fermented foods on there. And even if they don't like it, a little bit goes a long way. 1 or 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut or kimchi is good, right? So, and I think they have a really good safety profile for the most part. And any of the naturopathic doctors who my clients are working with, I let them see my protocols and they have no issues. And then we have supplementation, which I know I've already talked quite a bit about. But aside from when she's doing chemo and radiation in the 2 weeks prior and post to starting and finishing, she can usually get an okay from her oncologist to supplement with vitamin D. And, they'll let her do maybe 1,000 IUs. Some fish oil, because new research shows that it can help prevent bone metastasis, and high dose melatonin, which can boost the efficacy of tamoxifen. If she's taking that, I think they're kind of phasing tamoxifen out and replacing them with other aromatase inhibitors. But if she has an ND who specializes in oncology, then we can also see what else they recommend. Lifestyle, of course, which has to do with stress management. And these are some of the things that mean the most to me personally that get me through life. Exercise, for sure. If she's had a mastectomy done or lumpectomy, then or her medications can deplete her bone mass, and then she has joint pain, all sorts of stuff. So this is one thing I love, a little rebounder. I usually have one right behind my chair in my office. It's nice and small. It's a pain in the butt to put together, but well worth it. And her feet don't even have to leave the ground. Like she can just gently bounce, or she can sit on her bum and just bounce and do that for a few minutes, because the idea is to get her lymphatic system moving. So, our heart, helps our blood pump through our body, but our lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. So we want to keep it moving because cancer likes stagnancy. And then also some strength training too, which is excellent for building bone mass, which her meds are depleting. Plus her estrogen decline because she's probably been thrown into menopause with her medication, if she wasn't already in there already. So it's important for her to build strength. And there are physiotherapists who specialize in working with cancer patients to help them to get there. And then, of course, stress management, deep breathing, meditation, chakra clearing, practicing gratitude, massage, laughter, sleep, finding a better feeling thought. I'm a big Abraham Hicks person, so I just love that. That helps me every day. I listen to it every day to help redirect some of those negative conversations that creep into my head sometimes. So, and then of course, journaling, that's a big one. And then number 10, last but not least, being in alignment with who she is, right? And this is something that I try to practice as well, being true to who I am. I don't think that we were put on this earth to suffer. I think we were put here to live our purpose and to do the things that make us the happiest. I don't sweat the small stuff. I pick my battles, and I choose to do only the things of value and that are aligned with who I am. And I don't watch the news. It's full of toxic negativity, because what sells, that's what sells, right? If it bleeds, it leads. And that's the motto. And I don't let myself get sucked up into world issues that I simply can't change in any way. Instead, I try to make the most of the small, beautiful world around me, and the people in it. And that's what I try to encourage her to do as well. And I'll tell you, there is nothing more satisfying than to see one of my clients taking control over their diagnosis and over their lives as they start to find their purpose. And, it's really no wonder why there are so many people out there who have recovered from cancer, and are living with it, who just don't go back to their old jobs or their old lives. They become cancer coaches, or they do the thing that they always wanted to do, but didn't. And, they become so passionate and fulfilled. So ironically, some survivors do find that it took a cancer diagnosis for them to live a happier life. Okay, so I'm going to close this down now. Okay, so I think I got the questions. I think I've got that. But if there's anything that you want to talk about now, if you have a situation you want to speak of, or just have any other questions, please feel free. I do also want to say that if you ever need to reach out to me for any reason, I would be most happy to talk you through this. Okay, so my sister, no, unfortunately, she didn't make it. So actually, what I did want to talk about, so she went through the conventional system. We were doing a lot of stuff and she was doing a lot of stuff. She, she did extremely well for the first year with everything that we were doing. And then for a number of reasons, things just started to go wrong. And the conventional system just pummeled her with another thing after another thing, and it's poisoning. What they do is they poison them over and over and over again, and she just got so sick that there was nothing anybody could do at that point. I think it's that thing I was talking about earlier about these patients get thrown into this funnel and they just go down and down and down and spiral, and they're thrown from one thing to the next until they completely lose control. But one thing that I started really looking into is, it's called How to Starve Cancer, and it's by Jane McClellan. And this is just probably the most inspiring thing, or amazing thing I've been learning along the way. And I came across it when my sister and I were like working together. And basically this is the way of the future, I think, for cancer medicine. And I've been hearing oncologists now saying that we expect chemotherapy to be obsolete in the next 15 or 20 years. I'm not sure I believe that, but this is what they're looking at. The way they treat cancer now is they look at it as a genetic disease, right? So they treat the mutation, but the mutation is really downstream of what the cause is. So the cause is is damage to the mitochondria and how this cell is using cellular respiration, right? So, our cells go through oxidative phosphorylation, using oxygen to make energy, but the cancer cell uses, anaerobic environment. It uses fermentation. And that's what we want. And that's where the disconnect is. So if we can stop that there and kill the cancer cell, then the mutation disappears. So the way they talk about it here is they want to cut off every fuel source of the cancer cell. So we hear that cancer goes after glucose, absolutely. But if you cut off the glucose supply, it will go after glutamine, the amino acid, right? And then if you cut off the glutamine supply, it'll go after fat. If they say it'll go after fat, so the fatty acids. So then you cut all of those off. And there's these what are called off-label drugs or repurposed drugs that, like aspirin or lovastatin or doxycycline, things that are used for everyday things, or metformin for diabetes, but haven't been FDA approved for cancer. So the doctors should be able to prescribe them anyways, but they're losing their license if they try to do something like this. So the conventional doctors aren't even reading this stuff for the most part. So anyway, so once you starve that cancer cell, and then you get it into a position where it's so weak, you get in with the kill phase at that point. So you then go in with some low dose oral chemotherapy or high dose IV vitamin C therapy. So and we've got a few practitioners in Ottawa, Ontario, and I had everything. We had all this information in my back pocket. I did her whole, I looked up all her mutations and all of the sort of stuff and what medications and how we block all of her stuff. But, you bring it to the conventional oncologist and they just shut her down, right? And then they just made her sicker and sicker. And then we lost her last summer. But I am still continuing on with this because I know that if this happens to me, this is the sort of, this is the information that I want to be empowered by. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for sharing that about your sister too, and her outcome and her journey. I haven't read that book yet. But it's definitely on my list. I know we've talked a little bit because I've got some family going through
Yeah.
cancer treatment right now too. And it is such a paradigm shift, right? Looking at cancer as a genetic disease versus, how it had been conceptualized in the past. It's just a whole new way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So she's got two books, her original one, and then this one, the newest one is called And Then Kill It with Ferroptosis. So that's her most updated one for anybody who thinks that they want to get it. Um,
Mm. I see there's some more questions here. Keep them coming if you have any more.
yeah,
Sabine is asking, do you have a lot of clients that decide not to do conventional treatment and do a more natural route first?
no, I don't have any.
No.
I have ones who want to go in to do that, but usually when they come to see me, they've already started through that system. So yeah, but I would love that. I would love that too. But I do have clients now who feel so empowered with the information that they're getting. They're starting to do the research because a lot of oncologists have drugs that they want to test out too, and they use their clients, their patients as guinea pigs. So,
Mhm.
and when if you have 5 years to take this particular drug, they tell you to take this particular drug because it'll stop the metastasis to the bone or whatever or wherever else. And then you go in and you research and you're like, you know what? If I take it, I'm going to be like 4% more likely to not have it metastasize to like you have to do your research. You really have to advocate for yourself, I think, or have
Yeah,
somebody help you do it in this system.
that's so true.
Um, yeah.
Con
Kind.
yeah, I was
Mhm.
going to say, Connie says here, do you get women approaching you about how to prevent breast cancer and the value of mammograms?
No, I don't actually. I wish that I did because I've done, I've tried to do even webinars. I was going to do one on preventing. And, I think unless you've been impacted by it or someone really close to you, it's not at the forefront. It's just the urgency just isn't there. As far as mammograms, though, I'll tell you my own opinion on it because I'll be 50 in July and, I'm going to start getting those things from, Health Ontario, time for my mammogram. And I'm not doing it. I'm not doing a mammogram. And I'll tell you why. So, a lot of the times they're not good for women who have dense breasts, which we have in my family. Like my sister went for a mammogram, um, and it came back clear. Meanwhile, she had a 6 centimeter lump growing in her breast that she ended up finding herself, and then another one in her lymph node. So now there's research coming out saying doing this to a lump and injured tissue. When do we ever do that? Like when do we ever do that? So doing that is probably not such a great idea. And even talking about the biopsies and something called inflammatory oncotaxis, when they do the biopsy and they stab it and then the cancer cells can leak out into the bloodstream and metastasize somewhere else, and this risk is 1 in 200. Like the more you learn, the more decisions you actually have to make, right? Nobody can start making them for you. And now at this point, you have to start making your own decisions. But for the mammogram, I did talk to a doctor here, and she said I could get, like, what I'd have to do is get a referral to one of our hospitals does a CT mammogram, which is better. I would do that. Now they have ones where you can self-compress if you wanted to do that. I'd probably either opt for like a combination of things, maybe a thermograph, elastograph. I'm looking more into. I don't know if we do those here. An MRI, a PET scan, ultrasound, something a little, less, I don't know, crushy. I don't know. Anyway, so that's my opinion. So these are all the things that, I will probably be a lot more well-versed in about 6 months. So,
Yeah, it is. It's such a big decision because there is so much pressure around it too, right? Like
yeah.
it's almost just assumed that you hit a certain age or you have certain risk factors, and that's the next step. You need to go for a mammogram, and there's not really any alternatives presented.
No, there just isn't. And, by the time my doctor retired 4 years ago, we'd had so many conversations. She's like, the mammograms, they just don't work. They just don't work. And there's so many false positives, right? And then you get the biopsy and then you get all of that stuff. And now your body's going through all of these invasive things when sometimes it's not necessary. So,
Yeah. And so I'll share a little bit. That's actually a decision-making process I went through after a pregnancy. I had lumps in my breast.
yeah.
Turned out it was just breast tissue in my case, and changes that go along with lactating and all of that.
Yeah.
But I was concerned at
Mhm.
first,
Yeah.
and I had to go through that decision making. Like, do I want to go get this mammogram, potentially
Yeah.
have this false positive, and the rabbit hole that that brings you down, or
Yes.
can we look at some other things? And so a lot of I found there was less pushback. The MRI route is an option, and ultrasound too. They will do
Yes.
because that's relatively inexpensive for them to run. So,
Yes. And I've been reading another, there's a blood test called, you know what, I think it's EFC number 93, but I'd have to double check that. But basically, it's a marker for metastatic cancer, and they can determine it like 3 to 6 months prior to its spread. So if you have that, um, then you have cancer, but they know that chemo probably won't have the same effect, and then they can try to find other routes. So
wow.
that's another thing I'm going to be looking a lot more into, in the coming months and years too. And yeah, and
It's
even
amazing.
familiarizing myself more with the Dutch test too, to see how much value I can get out of that
Mhm.
for my clients.
Another on the front of testing, what about DNA testing? Do you have thoughts on that?
I don't really have any. I don't know enough about that. I don't think to have thoughts on that. I guess. Do you have thoughts on that or?
I don't think I know enough about it either to have strong thoughts. I think, um, I guess my own this is more of a personal bias, I think, than like a scientifically founded opinion.
Yeah.
But I think we can put a lot of power in the genetics, and that for some people it can be almost demotivating for
Yeah.
all of the things that we can do lifestyle and nutrition wise that change the epigenetics, which
Yes.
that at the end of the day is where the outcomes come from. And so I do worry sometimes that some of those genetic tests, it like labels people like, oh, this is something that's going to happen to me,
Yes.
when it's just something to be aware of, so you can be more proactive with your interventions in your
Yeah.
everyday life. So I don't know, I feel like it could be a double-edged, pros and cons.
I think so. And yeah, I think, and like with the BRCA gene, and really epigenetics is such a huge factor in how that plays out, right? So yeah, I mean, as far as my sister got something called the Foundation One test, and it tells you a list of all your mutations and what conventional medications to use for that. So she got that done through the US, but her oncologist was even like, it doesn't matter what it comes back as. Like, it's a $6,000 test. And he's like, it doesn't matter what that comes back as. Like, I'm still going to do the thing that I'm going to do. But what I did with it was I took all the mutations and then I looked them up to see what sort of pathway they took. Like, did they feed off sugar or whatever? So really extensive. So I guess there was some value in that too. But I think next time I'll probably just leave that to a practitioner who's a lot more well versed in this press pulse metabolic therapy. But yeah, so I guess there's some value to it. I mean, there's never harm in collecting as much information as you can. I guess it's just about prioritizing it. Yeah.
I see in the chat as well, Tikdis is asking, do you have any experience with SEACT?
Yeah, so I did have some clients on post recovery. They can usually go on the SACT, but they get pulled right off of that during any treatment with some medications as well. But I love the idea behind it. I love the herbs, but again, like the herbs being processed through the liver, they get pulled by even the naturopaths will pull them as well. Um,
And other question here, do you recommend supplements during chemo radiation or just after as a preventative?
Yeah. So again, the oncologist, like there's lots of, if this were me and I were doing this, I would probably still take more supplements than what are advised. But really, they pull them all off because they don't want any of these interactions to happen. So I don't have a lot of control with their supplements during those times. But afterwards, yes, like I think the melatonin, and I work with women with breast cancer, right? So the melatonin at a high dose, usually 20 milligrams at night before bed, I think is wonderful. We wean them up to that. The fish oils for sure, the vitamin D. If we can do green tea extract and turmeric, then absolutely. But if these women are on a lot of meds, then we have to be careful. And ultimately I try to do as much through food as possible. And I think that the juicing and the wheatgrass is so incredibly powerful. I could put them on the supplements and I don't think I would see the jump in blood work that I see when they are completely saturating them, their cells with these amazing nutrients. So because there's, there are all the nutrients we know about. And then I'm sure there's several that are undiscovered too, that are working some magic.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
All right. I think this is our last question.
Okay.
Jessica asks, can you speak a bit regarding radiation as a treatment versus radiation, i.e. from a mammogram, and it being carcinogenic?
Well, I don't know a ton about this. This is probably better for a radiologist, but what I assume is that there's a heck of a lot more when you're getting targeted radiation directly into your body as opposed to what you're getting from a mammogram. And when you get a mammogram, you're typically getting it annually or biannually or whatever. When you're getting radiation for cancer, you're doing it 5 days in a row, 20 days in a row, 16 days in a row. Like you're getting so much. And it scares me. I see, radiation does so much damage to our DNA. And with my sister in particular, like a day after she got 5 days of a day after she had 5 days of radiation, and then the following on the sixth day she was rushed to the ER. She thought she was having a heart attack, and it turns out it had spread all throughout her sternum. So I think I mean, people are different. They say they do targeted radiation and there's no collateral damage. I don't believe that, honestly. I just don't. But anyway.
But I feel like that's um, a difference in the paradigm too, right? As holistic nutritionists, there's really nothing that you can do to any part of your body that doesn't have an impact on the rest of your system, right?
Right, right.
Versus in that more conventional model, it is so segmented. Like you'll have a doctor who only deals with this part
Yes.
and they don't think about anything else, right?
No, no, exactly. All that systemic inflammation that's creating the fire within, and they're just like, no, you're fine here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess before we wrap up, you had mentioned wanting to mention about your olive oil. Is there anything else that you want to talk about
Yeah,
before we end
there's
for the
so many
night?
things I want to talk about, but no, I think, yeah, we could wrap up with the olive oil. So this was something I just kind of got onto recently. And I know there had been a whole bunch of hoo-ha going on about how some olive oils are not really made with olives, but, and there are a bunch of mixtures of other oils. But so I came across this company in Port Moody, BC. Connie, I don't know if you know that area or not, but it was I had started hearing, so again through Chris Wark, who I love so much, and I still listen to all his podcasts. He was interviewing Dr. Goran Limor, her name is, and she was doing research on oleocanthal in olive oils, in different olive oils, and it just kind of started happening. What she found was when she put, and there were already some studies before this, but she wanted to try it herself. So she would go to her lab and she would get some really fresh olive oil that was high in oleocanthal, and she would culture a bunch of cancer cells, and breast cancer cells were amongst that. And oh, she knows Port Moody. Okay. So anyways, right up your alley. And so she would put the cancer cells, and then she would put the olive oil with a high oleocanthal in with the culture, and then she'd go home for the night, and she'd come back in the morning, and all the cancer cells would be dead. And so oleocanthal isn't innate to the olive itself. It actually happens in the cold pressing. It comes out in the processing. So you won't just get it from eating a bunch of olives. And then she thought, well, I'm going to try this with a store-bought olive oil. So she went and she put the same culture of cancer cells into a petri dish and put the olive oil on there. And when she came back the next morning, they were all alive and healthy. So she thought, okay. So then she started trying 50 different, olive oils and different levels of oleocanthal from all around the world. And it was the same thing. So the higher level of the oleocanthal, the more likely all the cancer cells were going to be dead in the morning. So anyway, so I thought I've got to find somewhere in Canada where I can get some of this, and just did a little bit of research and found this company, All of the Best, and they give me 10% off, which is good because it is expensive. And this was, I think, $38, and I don't know if they have this one. This one's called Lentrisca, has an extremely high antioxidant and extremely high. And if you go on their website, they tell you, like in their write-up, how much oleocanthal and everything is in there. Okay, so we know this works great in the laboratory. We don't really know what a dose is for the human, but the people who I talk to who are doing this usually take a tablespoon a day. Again, it is expensive, so if the salad's just for me, I'll put it on. But if it's for like a family outing, I'm like, forget it. But I'll take a tablespoon a day or whatever, and just make sure I get it in me. And your oleocanthal is what gives that peppery in your throat to the olive oil. So if your olive oil now doesn't have any of that, then you might want to rethink what you're buying. So that's it. It's just another thing that we look in the way of prevention, and And yeah, that's it. Again, so if you want it, contact me through Networking Nutritionist or email me or whatever afterwards. And then I'll let them know if you want to order some. And then it's free delivery across Canada. And let me know. And then they'll send you a code so you can get a 10% discount. And then, yeah.
That's
Sounds
awesome.
great.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for that, Diane. I'll make sure we have that information up with the replay as well, how folks can get in touch with you
Amazing.
if they want to take you up on that offer. I think I might try that out.
Great.
I'm becoming a bit of an olive oil snob these
Yes.
days, so I think this would
Right.
be a good one for me to
Yes.
try.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. Yes.
Wonderful.
I know. And I'm pretty preachy about it.
Thank you so much. I've seen some amazing comments here. Everyone thanking you for this awesome information that you've been sharing. And I echo those sentiments. This was a great time and I learned a bunch of things.
Right.
And I think you did a really wonderful job just distilling down what it's like to work with this population and how we can be supportive of them. And I think an important part of that too is just knowing the folks around you to make referrals to as well. If
Yeah.
for those of you who are watching live or on the replay, if you do have the unfortunate experience of a diagnosis yourself or a loved one, sometimes it can be nice to have someone else to come in and
Yes.
give support as well. So
100%.
we'll have all of those links to your program and your website so folks can check you out too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me do this. This was
All
great.
right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
You too.
Take care.
Bye.